Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm George Moss again here at allpointstv.com, also 92.1 WFOV. And sometimes we're with the Facebook audience as well, not today, but in other occasions. We are going to be talking about a couple of topics today. I wanted to finish up what we did last week. We were talking about the implications of the attempted overthrow and coup d'etat against the Trump administration, the attempted overthrow of this administration, and how the implication of that is going back to, and the question being raised of what have these intelligence agencies that tried to overthrow Donald Trump's administration, what have they done in the past in other situations? And I think that we have to go back and now re-examine some of the other upheavals we've had on the national level with other presidents. And I think that goes to the heart of what occurred with Richard Milhous Nixon's administration, and also what happened with John F. Kennedy. I don't think anybody is thinking about what are the implications of this to the assassination that occurred in Dealey Plaza. So last week we started talking about the Kennedy assassination, which I think we have to go back and at least think about reinvestigating that case. Because I'm not so sure. In fact, I know we didn't get to the heart of what occurred at that time. We're going to talk about that as the first part of our topic today, and we're going to also talk about the administration of Barack Obama. I don't think we really understand the presidency that we had with the 44th president of the United States, and I want to go into that just a little bit more about what occurred there, because I don't think anybody really has seen the really actual usurpation of power that occurred during the Obama administration, and I want to try to bring that into a more public view. Last week we were talking about the Kennedy assassination, and after the program was over, I went back to read some of the documents over again that I have been reading over the last so many years, just studying what occurred there. I think I got a pretty good handle on it. And I was looking at the motorcade route. I can see, quite frankly, that this was conspiracy just in terms of what occurred with the motorcade, which when you look at the route that was taken, and see how it was changed for no apparent reason. Just looking at the motorcade route and what it was eventually changed to, and going into what this book I brought to the studio, Craig Roberts' book, calls The Kill Zone, to see how that route took Kennedy into the kill zone. You can just see by the change of the motorcade route, that there was conspiracy. So to get us started today, to do the second part of our programming on the Kennedy assassination, which I think is very relevant now that we have seen what happened with this fake hoax that they put in front of the American people for 2 years in an attempt to topple a duly held election in this country. And it just raised the question of what else was the intelligence community doing, because this was an intelligence agency apparatus. The FBI, the CIA, and the DIA were all involved in an attempt to change the outcome of the election held November the 8th, 2016. And I don't think we can leave this issue of what occurred here without going back to what occurred in previous incidents. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Kennedy incident through the lens of what's happening right now. This is an article that came out. It's called "The Motorcade Route Was Changed." And this article came out July the 8th, 2004. And it has to do with this route that was intended and how it was changed at the 11th hour, so to speak. And that right there indicates that this is a conspiracy, because you cannot change it at the last minute and then have those shooters there waiting for the president to arrive in the kill zone, because they've already set up in the kill zone. They've set this up already, and they could not have done that unless they were aware of what route the president would take, and it had been changed at the last minute. Those shooters are not there at the last minute. This has been set up ahead of time, so they are aware of that route being changed before it was announced. Let me read this to you. This is an article that came out in 2004. The motorcade route was changed. This is written by Anthony Frank, investigative reporter. He says, I am at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. I just read through the Dallas Morning News for the week that Kennedy was killed. On Monday, the Dallas Morning News simply speculated that the motorcade would travel down Main Street. On Wednesday, the Dallas Morning News stated that it would indeed travel straight down Main. Now, this is Wednesday of the week in which the assassination took place. Don't forget, the assassination took place Friday. So on Wednesday, the Dallas Morning News stated that it would indeed travel straight down Main. So the Monday report and the Wednesday report is that the motorcade will go down Main Street. On Thursday, November the 21st, 1963, don't forget the president now was assassinated November 22nd, the next day. On Thursday, November 21st, 1963, the Dallas Morning News had a map with a motorcade going straight down Main and not making any turns. No turns were intended. Mayor Earl Campbell of Dallas was a brother of Air Force General C.P. Cabell, who was Allen Dulles' deputy director at the CIA. Now, that may not sound like a lot or even relevant, but Allen Dulles was the director of the CIA that was fired by John F. Kennedy. And now the mayor, Earl Cabell of Dallas, the brother of Air Force General Cabell, who was Allen Dulles' deputy director of the CIA, and his motorcade route was scheduled to go down Main Street. On Thursday, November 21st, 1963, the Dallas Morning News had a map with a motorcade going straight down Main and not making any turns. Mayor Earl Campbell's administration made a change in the route that President Kennedy's motorcade would take. Instead of traveling straight down Main through the middle of Dealey Plaza, which was the route published in the Dallas Morning News on November 21st, the motorcade turned right on Houston and went over to the Texas School Book Depository at Elm in Houston. It turned left and headed down Elm. President Kennedy was shot and killed on Elm. Now let me just kind of demonstrate before I read some of the rest of the excerpts from Kill Zone by Craig Roberts, who was a sniper, by the way, in the armed forces. And the book is titled Kill Zone: A Sniper Looks at Dealey Plaza. So let me try to demonstrate what this car is doing. And when I looked at the motorcade route that was changed, I saw right there that was conspiracy, because here's what that motorcade did once that route was altered. If it had continued on to the route it intended, going down Main Street, it would have gone past Houston and it would not have made that turn. It turns right going north on Houston Street. So when that motorcade route is changed, here's what that route does. Rather than continuing on Main Street, going across Houston and going straight on Main, that car turns right. Now that car, which was going west, it now is going north. It turns right, so it's going north now. It's going north for 1 block on Houston Street to Elm Street. Now, if you go look at the book depository building, where Oswald is supposedly perched on the 6th floor of that building, that car coming down a block on Houston Street, going north, that car is going directly toward that shooter if that shooter is on that 6th floor. He's going directly toward that shooter. And what's interesting to me as I look at that fact, as a fact, heading toward that shooter, that shot, which Craig Roberts in his book called The Kill Zone says is the second best place to have shot the president. And what is interesting is that shot is not taken. Now, keep in mind, that's the second best spot for a sniper. To take a shot as a car is going toward Elm Street, because that building is on the corner of Houston and Elm. That's what that motorcade is coming directly toward that shooter, and that shot is not fired at that time. I agree with Craig Roberts. That is the second best place to, if you're going to assassinate the president, that's the second best place to do it. The best place, though, is the turn that's made off Houston onto Elms. That turn right there shows me again that this is conspiracy, because it is against the regulations of the Secret Service to have the president going into a place where there's a turn of that curvature. That turn is at a 120-degree angle. So that turn is made right underneath that window where that shooter, suppose this person on the 6th floor, he's now looking down at the Kennedy car right there in front of that window. That turn is being made right in front of that window on the 6th floor. And that shot is not taken. That's, Craig Roberts says that shot would have been the best of the shots that could have been fired. Because the one coming down Houston Street for 1 block toward Elm Street, at least you could say then that that is a more difficult shot because it's at a distance of a block, although it's coming toward that window. But when the car is turned on Elm Street, that car is now underneath that window, and that motorcade is open. I mean, the Kennedy car is open. There's no dome on top of that car. And he's right underneath that window, and that shot is not taken. Now, anybody that studied this scenario has to ask the question, why is it, if Craig Roberts is right, and I would agree with him that he's right, I don't think any of the investigators would deny that he's right, that those two exposures of the president are the best places to have fired the bullet to kill the President of the United States. But neither one of those bullets are fired at that point in time. Something has explained that. And there's only one thing that can explain it. Because all the shots beyond that are more difficult shots for the shooter on the 6th floor. So why isn't that shot taken? There's only one possible explanation. The shooter on the 6th floor is aware of the other shooters in Dealey Plaza. And of the fact that there are other shooters in Dealey Plaza, there's absolutely no doubt about it. Because it was captured on the film that was made by a person that went there as a spectator and went there to film the president's arrival and his visit to show to his grandchildren. So he's there, a guy by the name of Abraham Zapruder. that does not know, first of all, does not know why he's been moved out of his original place where he wanted to shoot from. They made him move. He didn't understand why they wanted him to move, but somebody came to him and told him that you're not going to be here. And we're not letting him film from his original site, but he's at a place where he can still film what went on. He's now in front of the motorcade. And when the turn is made at a 120-degree angle from Houston Street onto Elm Street, that car has to slow down to a rate of speed of between 7 miles an hour and 11 miles an hour. And that shooter does not take that shot either. He doesn't take the shot on Houston Street, and he doesn't take the shot as the motorcade car is turning off of Houston on Elm Street. Right underneath that window, that shot is not taken. That's when the president is closest to the shooter on the 6th floor, and that shot is not taken. There can only be one reason why that shot is not taken. I don't think any investigator that studied this case will disagree with this. That shot is not taken because the shooter on the 6th floor is aware of the positioning of the other shooters. And by not taking that shot, the president is now in between the shooters, those in the front and those in the back. And they're in the back of this president in two places, on the 6th floor and also on the 3rd floor of the Dow Tax building. And there are at least 2 firing squads. When I say firing squads, I'm talking about teams of 2. These are not large groups. These are teams of 2 persons. There's a spotter, and there's the person with the gun. With the gun, on the 6th floor, there's a person up there with the 7.65 German Mauser. The Italian Concano rifle is a plant on that floor. The Italian Lee Harvey Oswald, who is on the 2nd floor of that building, school depository building, when those shots are fired. That's the framing, that's the diversion that was created. That's why that shooting could not have occurred on Main Street, because the patsy was not there. Lee Harvey Oswald said he was a patsy, and he was a patsy. He's on the 2nd floor of the cafeteria when those shots were in fact fired. Within a time period timed at 5.6 seconds. This assassination was over underneath 6 seconds, because there were 3 firing angles in Dealey Plaza. The first shot from the school depository. The second shot was from the Dow Tax building. There are 2 shooters in the back of the president. And then there's one shooter, one team in the front, and that team is in the grassy knoll. So why didn't the person take the shot on Houston Street? And why didn't he take the shot when the president was underneath the window of the sniper's nest on the 6th floor of the school depository building? It's because if the best way to frame the patsy was to in fact have the president caught in a crossfire, but bullets being fired simultaneously, where it seems like in that plaza, these are single shots. There were at least some said there were 11 shots fired. I don't see 11 shots. I know multiple shots. I think 6 shots can certainly be counted from different angles. So the president's hit from the first shot, hits the president in the back, in the area below the neckline. He's not shot in the neck. There's another shot that is fired which misses. seemingly that shot is lined up with the bullet from the Dow Tax building. That bullet hits the cement and ricochets and hits a guy standing by the underpass, by a guy by the name of James Teague. He doesn't know he's hit, but he later on finds that he's bleeding. And that would have been a shot that missed the motorcade. That bullet is in line with the Dow Tax building. Then a bullet hits the president. This is the third shot. Then a bullet hits the president in the throat. That bullet is from the overpass. That bullet is fired into the president's throat. And then 2 bullets hit the president simultaneously in the head. So how many bullets is that? They said that there were 3 bullets fired. Well, 1 bullet missed. 1 bullet is in the president's back. I should count another bullet also. 1 bullet hits Connally. So we count these bullets up. 1 bullet hits the president in the back. 1 bullet misses from the Dow Tax building. 1 hits the president in the throat. 1 bullet hits Connally, not the same bullet that hit Kennedy in the back, because that bullet did not exit the president's back. The bullet hit Connally is a different bullet. Then there's there's 1. Let's see, 1 in the back. 1 misses, 1 in the president's throat, 1 bullet hits Connally, and 2 bullets hit the president in the head, 1/100th second apart. 1 knocks him temporarily forward, and then pow, the exploding bullet, the one that hits him in the head, fired from the grassy knoll area, drives the president back to the back of the car and over to the left. There's 6 bullets being fired. And you can look at the positions of the shots that have been lined up where those bullets would come from. There are 3 angles that the president was killed from, 3 shooters in that Dealey Plaza, and this president was caught in triangular fire. This is a sniper's nest. This was an ambush. And we can go back and now see how this crime was committed, and we can also see how it was covered up. Because there are clues in the Donald Trump situation. You know, what we saw in with the Donald Trump investigation, we can use that to go back and look at Dealey Plaza again. Because we now know, and this was exposed, that Mueller did not write the report. We now know that. Mueller was stumbling all over the place, wasn't he, in terms of trying to tell the House Judiciary Committee and also later on the House Intelligence Committee what was in the report. He could not tell the people what was in that report. And if he had written a report, he would have been able to do so. And the fact that he was not able to tell what was in the report just indicates again what we already knew. He was not the author of the report. So now the question comes up of who wrote that report and why is Mueller there as the person standing in front of those persons that were in back of him that was doing the reporting of what occurred. Because he didn't do it. He did not write it. And the parallel, and the reason why we need to look at this and then go to the writing of the report of the Kennedy assassination is because the same thing occurred. You put the name of a respected person on the report, and then you do the cover-up. And that's what happened with the investigation of Donald Trump, and that's what happened to the cover-up of what happened in Dealey Plaza. Earl Warren didn't write this report. And all of the persons on that committee were assigned by the person that benefited from the assassination. And it occurred in his state. They lured Kennedy into Dallas. If we had known then what we know now, they would never gotten away with it. But we didn't know that our government is run by criminals. There was no way for us why would we challenge the government when the government leader is being killed? We had no idea that was possible in this country. Although we'd been warned by Dwight Eisenhower that there was a group of people that was beginning to form inside of the government that was very dangerous. Okay, so we're going to take a break right now, and want you to stay tuned on the other side of the break, those of you at WFOV. We're going to continue what we're saying here. I'm going to read from Craig Roberts' book and finish it up. But I want to lay the foundation for it in terms of the fact that the president was caught in triangular fire, and there was a firing squad in Dealey Plaza, and they had to know the route because the route was changed at the last minute, and they could not have set the operation up unless they knew ahead of time the motorcade route was going to be taken. And that was somebody that was inside of the government that would have in fact done that. Earl Warren was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And they did the same thing in that case that we saw them doing in the case of putting Mueller, who had, before he was on this committee, had a stellar reputation before this. And they used the stellar reputation to do the work in the background, and they had done the same thing with Earl Warren. Earl Warren was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. We now know, reading the book by Russ Baker, that Johnson threatened Earl Warren, who did not want to serve on the commission. And Johnson called him into his office. This is now documented by Russ Baker's book called Family of Secrets, and told him that he needed him to be over the report because he had to convince the country that Oswald did it. That was the reason for the Warren Commission being set up, to in fact implicate Oswald in the murder, and to claim only 3 shots were fired, which were laid out on the 6th floor of the school depository in a row. And those bullets being fired, they would have ended up, by the way, if those bullets were being ejected and not planted, those bullets would have ended up in some of those boxes up there. But they laid out in a row on the 6th floor of the school depository. That shows another example of a conspiracy being created. And also the framing of Lee Harvey Oswald, because that gun that they're going to claim they found on that floor, and by the way, they found 2 guns on that floor. Only one of them was reported. They found 2 guns up there. I think one of the persons on that floor was Malcolm Wallace. Johnson hitman was up there. And in the Dealey Plaza, there was E. Howard Hunt, and there was also Frank Sturgis. They were arrested in the Dealey Plaza also, and they got removed from the investigation, and somebody got lost in the investigation in Dallas. Their names got removed from the record. But Frank Sturgis, that name should ring a bell, because Frank Sturgis was also involved in Watergate. He's one of the burglars in Watergate. E. Howard Hunt was a contact person. His name was his intelligence name was Eduardo. He is now planted inside of the Nixon administration, and he is the one that ordered the break-in, not Richard Nixon. That's documented also. So these people have been around for a while, and they've been working behind the scenes to topple administrations of this country. And we now have them out of the woodwork, and we're going to see if they're going to investigate this scenario, this thing that they did with Donald Trump. We're going to see if anybody is arrested, if anybody goes to jail. If they're not put in jail, then that means that the deep state the apparatus is still intact. Because we know now that this situation here ties into what occurred in Dealey Plaza. The same forces, the same intelligence agency. And we had a coup d'etat in Dealey Plaza. Okay, let me read from the kill zone. A sniper looks at Dealey Plaza. It's a warm, muggy November day, but only 2 windows on the 6th floor are open in the unair-conditioned building. He's saying now he's gonna put himself in the sniper's nest. So he's now up there on that 6th floor. He's imagining then what's happening to the persons up there. He says, "You're sweating, both because of the heat and because of what you are getting ready to do. Your plans are just about to culminate in your chance to change history. You look at your watch. It's almost time. You pick up your rifle and kneel at the window overlooking Elm Street. For some unfathomable reason, you have picked a confined area of Elm Street as your kill zone. You have disregarded Hudson Street, affording you a straight head-on shot for over a block, where the motorcade will move slowly towards you. But shooting Kennedy from the front when he is most vulnerable is not what you intend to do. You have decided for some reason to shoot Kennedy in the back, through the trees, on a winding street, at a relatively steep vertical angle in a partially obscured, confined area that is barely visible from the window on the Elm Street, on the Elm side. Now it's time. The motorcade is approaching. You work the bolt on the rifle, chambering an unpredictable round nose 6.5 millimeter cartridge. You wait. The motorcade turns the corner on Elm, each vehicle almost stopping as they negotiate the 120-degree turn. Then you see the president. You hold your breath. Try your best to relax. Aim the weapon, centering on the head of the President of the United States in your scope. Take up the slack from the trigger and squeeze. Your last shot, the car is now at maximum range, actually almost out of view. But miraculously, for some reason, the car slows almost to a complete stop. They're shooting, and the car, during the time the shooting is going on, the driver of the car, who is Secret Service, brings the car to almost a complete stop. And in fact, you can see in the Zapruder film, the lights, the back lights, the brake lights come on. So the driver, trained to, if anything occurs, trained to get out of the area of the problem, we see the brake lights go on. The car comes to a stop. You realign the sight, and you focus again on the dark blue Lincoln as it begins to disappear around the bend behind the damn tree. He says, "Screw it, shoot." Your last shot. The car is now at maximum range. Now he's talking about if Oswald is the shooter. Elapsed time so far since the first shot, 5.6 seconds. Not bad, considering that it takes a minimum of 3.3 seconds to fire. Work the bolt and fire again. And then only if you don't take time to accurately realign the rifle on the target before the next shot. Let me see. Let me read here, because I want to skip over some of this because you got the idea of what's going on. The policeman, Dallas motorcycle officer Marion Baker, asked your boss if you are an employee. Because now Baker has run into the building. The police officer runs in the building. He sees Oswald on the second floor drinking a Coke. It's important to note that the Coke is halfway finished. The Coke bottle is half empty, which means that Oswald has been there for a while, and there is only 90 seconds between the time that the last shot has been fired and Oswald is seen by this officer rush into the building, is in that cafeteria. Think about that for a minute, because you have to put the rifle down, hide the rifle, get out of the area. The elevator is stuck on the 4th floor. You got to run down 4 flights of steps to get to the cafeterias on the 2nd floor. And the officer sees Oswald, wants to find out who he is before heading up to the 6th floor. And the employer of the building identifies Oswald as one of the workers in the book depository. So that's where the writer picks up at that point. The policeman, Dallas motorcycle officer Marion Baker, asked Oswald's boss, if you are an employer. When this is confirmed, he breaks away to search the floors above. A few seconds later, after Baker is out of sight, you, meaning Oswald, make your getaway. But instead of taking some pre-planned mode of transportation out of town, you simply walk out the front door, where you run into NBC reporter Robert McNeil. Remember the McNeil Learner Report on PBS? You run into NBC reporter Robert McNeil, who asks directions to the nearest telephone. You deal with him in a very calm, collected manner. Then go home to your rented home, your rented room. You know that you will soon be missed at work, that the Dallas police will begin rounding up anyone in the vicinity to question almost immediately. But you still don't try to escape by leaving the city. Even if you decided at the last moment to attempt such a move, you wouldn't be able to get very far on the $17 on you that you have in your pocket. Instead, you decide to take a walk outside in public view. 23 years after those shots were fired, this is now Craig Roberts dealing with this incident. He says, 23 years after those shots were fired, I walked away from the window in disgust, because he's now visiting that site 23 years later. So this is 1976. No, I'm sorry, this is 1986. 23 years after those shots were fired, I walked away from the windows in disgust. I had seen all I needed to know that Oswald could not have been the lone shooter. As I walked toward the elevator, I began to look at the scene as a police officer. If one could forget that the victim was the President of the United States, and this was a political assassination, and simply work the scene as a standard homicide, perhaps it could be put into a manageable perspective. The next thing that would have to be done would be to examine the rest of Dealey Plaza. A homicide scene is not simply the place the body was found, it is the entire area of influence that might contain clues. In this case, the crime scene was anywhere within range of a high-powered rifle. He says, I walked out of the book depository and crossed the street. I stopped for a moment and looked around. There were several possible spots for a second shooter, which meant that more than 2 riflemen could have been positioned. Exactly what positions were utilized depended upon the physical trajectories of the bullets that had been fired. That would come later. I walked all around Dealey Plaza, exploring the spot that I felt might serve the purpose of a sniper. Finally, I arrived at the grassy knoll and the picket fence, which I had purposely saved for last. I walked up the slope and around the fence, arriving in a parking lot that was bordered on the northwest by train tracks. I walked the length of the fence, stopping at a spot on the eastern end. I looked over the fence at Elm Street and froze. This is exactly where I would position myself if I wanted the most accurate shot possible, considering the terrain I had explored. It has some drawbacks. It was close to witnesses and prone to pre-incident discovery. But the advantages far outweighed the disadvantages for a determined assassin. The target vehicle would be approaching instead of moving away, thereby continually decreasing the range. The shot would be almost flat trajectory, making the down angle formula a moot point. There's a direct line, he's saying, toward the motorcade, toward that limousine. The target vehicle would be approaching instead of moving away, thereby continually decreasing the range. The shot would be almost flat trajectory, making the down angle formula a moot point. The deflection right to left angle would change little until the car passed a freeway sign on the north curb line. The president is coming from behind the Stedman sign, and you can see the president using both hands clutching his throat. The president's been hit from the front. All the doctors that saw that shot said that shot was a front wound. And finally, it offered numerous escape route possibilities. Behind me, now he's standing behind the grassy knoll and behind the picket fence on the grassy knoll. Behind me, to the north and west, was a parking lot full of cars, a train yard full of boxcars, and several physical terrain features to use as cover during withdrawal. It was by far the best spot. Looking almost due east, across the grassy knoll, open park-like plaza, I could see 2 multi-story office-type buildings, approximately the same height as the depository. That's a Dow tax building. The rooftops of either building would be excellent firing positions for a trained rifleman with the proper equipment, and would be the places I would select if I wanted the best possible chance of not being detected in advance. Without going to the roofs of each, I could not determine the accessibility of escape routes. But for firing platform, they were ideal. Then, considering the possibility of multiple snipers, which means a conspiracy, I had to ask myself how I would position the shooters to cover the kill zone in front of the grassy knoll. My military training once again took over. I would use an area within the plaza that would afford the best kill zone for either a crossfire or triangular fire. Simply put, I would position my teams in such a way that their trajectory of fire converged on the most advantageous point to assure a kill. In the military, single snipers are seldom used. Why? Because you might miss. So you in a sniper situation, you never use a single sniper. You want triangular fire, shooting from different directions. In the military, single snipers are seldom used. Normally, the smaller sniper team consists of 2 men, a sniper and a spotter, the security man. Even in police SWAT and SWAT teams, a marksman has an observer who is equipped with a spotting scope or binoculars to help pick and identify the targets and handle the radio communications. We see radios in Dealey Plaza. There's a person on the curve, sitting at the curve, that has a device that he's communicating in. We can see that through the Zapruder film. There's also another person in Dealey Plaza that's very suspicious, and that's this umbrella man. Rain has already stopped. Now the sun is out. That's why they took the cover off of the president's car, because it was there. The dome would have been put there if the rain had continued. But because the rain is not, it's no longer raining, they took the bubble top off of the president's car. There's a person there with an umbrella, and he's doing this, and I'm modulating here, the umbrella going up and down. That person is raising that umbrella up and down. He's flashing that umbrella, signaling those shooters. If the umbrella was in fact raised one time, we say he's closing the umbrella. But to flap it like he's doing is an indication that there's a signal. And the signal is the president has not been hit in the head yet. That fatal shot has not been fired. And so that firing continues. They had intended 3 shots to be fired. It takes 6 shots to accomplish what they accomplished. And one of the shooters over there has confessed to the shooting, by the way. The person's in the grassy knoll, one of the shooters in the grassy knoll, James Fowles, has confessed to the shooting. And he said he saw when the motorcade was coming down Elm Street, he knew they were going for a headshot, and the president had not been hit in the head. And therefore, he takes, before the president's out of range, he takes his shot. He was not supposed to shoot unless the president had escaped injury from the other shooters. And so James Fowles, who has confessed to this killing, by the way, and they act like they don't even know who James Fowles is. James Fowles is in prison right now, and has confessed to this crime, being a part of this crime. We know who the killers were. This was a mafia, CIA hit. That's why one of the persons dating one of the mafia members said that she couldn't tell where the mafia was and where the government was, because they were basically the same people. Or that's what Charles Ashton's writing about in his book called, Charles Ashton has a book out called The Mafia CIA Link. The link between the mafia, the Cosa Nostra, and the Cosa Nostra inside of our government. That's not called Cosa Nostra, it's called the CIA and these other intelligence units. And how they came together to serve their own collective interests. The mafia, because Kennedy because of the Bay of Pigs invasion. The mafia wanted those casinos back in Cuba. And the CIA, because they considered Kennedy to be soft on communism, because he did not, in fact, strike Castro 90 miles off the coast of Florida. And both of them wanted him out of the way. And both of them saw him as a threat. So the CIA Mafia link by Charles Ashman is connecting these two groups that conspired to murder a president of the United States, and then the crime being covered up by the government, by the American government. Let me get some out of my files here. If you think this is not something that we need to be concerned about in this country, let me read this to you in terms of what's presently taking place, in terms of how they still are orchestrating things from behind the scenes. We have gangsters here running our government. Here's a report in my files. It's called the United States Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. It was set up under Jimmy Carter. Is anybody surprised it's set up under the Democrats? Is anybody surprised that this momentum towards socialism that we see right now, with them now going full force toward socialism, under with these Democrats trying to topple the Donald Trump administration, is trying to stop this communist insurgency? Are we stunned by it in terms of the McCarthy period, where McCarthy was trying to warn this country about, in the background, an attempt to take over this country through socialism, which is now running full steam ahead? Are we surprised at that? Well, in 1977, the FISA court was set up under Jimmy Carter, the Democrat, the ones that are pushing democratic socialism, telling us that socialism is democratic. Socialism is state control. There's nothing democratic about it. They are attacking the democratic process in this country. In 1979, don't forget I said that the FISA court was set up under Jimmy Carter in 1977, 78, somewhere around there. In 1979, there were 199 requests for the FISA court to approve surveillance on American citizens. 199 requests were submitted. Now, the targets of that, the number of targets that were requested for the surveillance was 207, and every last one of them was approved by the FISA court, a secret court in the United States. Between 1979 and 2002, there were over that 23-year period of time, 15,264 FISA requests for surveillance of American citizens, and there were 0 turned down. 15,000 requests between 1979 and 2002, and every last one of them were approved. Six were requested to be modified, but eventually every last one of them was approved, with spying on 15,264 different instances that were approved by the FISA court. In other words, there were none that were turned down. Let me tell you something. If you do not bring Edward Snowden back to the United States and make him whole, then the cover-up continues. Because Edward Snowden is a hero. Because he saw this and tried to expose what he saw these persons doing. And now he's in exile. Now, from 1979 to 2002, 15,264 requests were made to do surveillance on the American people. No requests were turned down. 6 requests, as I said earlier, were altered. 1 in 1980, 1 in 2000, 4 in 2001. But between 2003 to 2017, there were 38,289 requests. And of that number, 85 were denied. 85 were denied. What's really, and I'll close with this point here. What is really important to see here in this chart is that in 2016 and 2017, this is a time in which Donald Trump is running for president, wherein there have never been more than 86 requests in a single, 94 in a single year. In 2016 and 2017, there were 310 requests that were made. In other words, when Trump is running, 310 requests were made in 2016, and 310 were made in 2017. They picked up the intensity of the investigation because we have Donald Trump running. And the other side of the election, you see what they're doing with trying to frame this man, President of the United States. That's what we're dealing with. Keep your eyes open, because it's not over until it's over. Okay, we'll be back again next week with another topic, and I will be covering, I didn't get around to it today, but I will be covering President Barack Obama, because nobody wants to talk about that part of this scenario. We'll cover that next week. Until next week, I want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.